Shavai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May that one protect us all, protect us both, nourish us, and also give vigor to us and vigor to our studies. May we not, in an unwarranted way, disagree with each other or couple. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. And we normally start these sessions with a question. So this is where people either look like a rabbit caught in the headlights, or where there's some thoughtful question come down.
Which chapter are
we're studying, good question, we're studying 10th chapter, Vibhuti Yoga. And the purport of the 10th chapter really is to give us a sample of the glory, which gives us an inference about something that has no moving parts or any change in evolution. And for that reason, every person who tries to conceive of the ultimate struggles. And therefore there are so many versions of what this, and interpretations and forms and shapes and qualities that are produced. In that sense, in Vivekananda's language, we make God in our own image and likeness. So how to deal in the beginning stages, as it were, and for long periods of time with a kind of rapport or relationship with some entity that is beyond our scope, beyond our normal scope. So the eyes won't catch it, the ears won't catch it, but they'll catch the glory which is there, just as we catch the rays of the sun, but not the sun itself necessarily. And that leads us to an understanding. It gives us an internal awakening, a kind of internal rapture about the glories and possibilities around us. It gives us a sense of adoration, thankfulness, and a sense of wonder also. And so in this chapter, we are given a number of samples of these glories, vibhuti, and some of them referring in a mythological way, which requires some explanation, and maybe minimal explanation to make it universally comprehensible. So we left off last week with the 29th stanza, which tells us that Anandascha asmi nagaram varuna yadasam aham. You see, of the nagas, that is of the water creatures, we find Ananta. Ananta is where Vishnu sits, where Vishnu lies, and represents cosmic waters. According to the ancient cosmology, everything begins with Shila, a kind of watery substance. What we can view as some kind of fluid aspect in nature, which is primordial to everything else. And so we can easily compare it to a vast ocean, and we're only seeing the crest of the crest of the crest of a wave. Just the very, very foam, if you will, or the very inference of a foam is our world, which we make very big. Because our understanding is like that, it's limited. And so this inference of this Ananta, of all the nagas, of all the watery elements, all those in charge of water in its various aspects, we find this primordial Ananta from which everything comes. And also I am Varuna. Varuna, the ancient Vedic deity that represents water and all watery things, given primary of place, since water is seen to be a vital part of our life and all life and the whole of nature. Varuna is honored, one of the Vedic deities. He has his jurisdiction on earth and in heaven. And then mention is made of the ancestors. So, Pitranam Aryama Chismi Yamaha Samyamamatam Aham. That is, of all the Pitras, the ancestral beings, I am the first among them, something like Adam, if you like, in the Judeo-Christian tradition, and therefore controller of all of that, deified in that sense. And then, of course, Yam. I am the Lord who controls all this life and death, but also self-control, where we find self-control, the impulse to control oneself and lead a moral life, there I am. There the Lord is. As soon as you see that, you see there's a way of tracing back more and more subtle areas until you find there you are, Lord. And then it goes on to say, Prahladas chasmi dajyanam kalaha kalayatam aham mriganam cha mrigendroham vainetyascha pakshinam. Of the daityas, we tend to divide everything into good and bad, moral, immoral, good beings, bad beings, and we find in all the various epics and all the various Puranas and mythologies, universally, we find this division. And so, for example, when the Jews found themselves in exile in Babylon, they came across this Zoroastrian philosophy from what is Persia, and you find these angels of good, angels of darkness, is a part, in a sense, of the Vedic tradition. And so, with this natural division, we tend to think that these daityas, opposed to the devas, the beings of light, are bad. Devas good, daityas bad. But a shining example of them is Prahlada. And those who know the story of Prahlada will understand. Those who don't, I want to refer to it by quoting from Sister Nivedita, where she gives the story in a beautiful style. So I won't read the whole thing, only just highlight some things so you get the essence of the story and understand why Prahlada is not only the shining model for us all in terms of devotion and the model of a devotee, but also the possibility that anybody in any state, born in any state, you see, we tend to use two difficult words to make excuses. One is but and one is if. Everything would be okay, but. There's a but in there, you see, it gives us an excuse. Or, I would be fine if only I were born under lucky star and all that kind of thing, see. But it doesn't matter what condition you are, the possibility of being a great devotee is there. From that point of view, a great model. And then a model for youth, because Prahlada was a mere child. So these three models are represented here in the life of Prahlada. So you see, we can find the story first. Two to three. So she begins off like this. There's a strange old Hindu notion according to which a very young child is said to be like a fish. Then comes a time when all the baby's eagerness is for food, and his little arms and legs, head are like so many small appendages, almost always kicking. And so this stage of development suggests the tortoise, and the next baby creeps on all fours, how like a boar. Then it begins to leap upwards and fall down, half man, half lion. And here she's referring to a kind of evolutionary process represented as the Lord that sustains everything and evolves from within and comes out in various biologically evolutionary stages. And so we find this is what she's coming to. We find all these incarnations of Vishnu come in these particular stages. So after that she continues, he becomes a dwarf or little man. At last comes the age of the heroes, Ram, Krishna and so on, who make it possible to be a Buddha. And altogether the Hindus count 10 of these degrees or steps and call them the incarnations of God Vishnu. She begins like that. Hiranyakshipu was the king of the Daityas, those beings that are demons, if you like. Now these demons are the cousins of the devas. They have to be cousins, you can't make separate entities. So how similar it is to the Judeo-Christian stories of the fallen angel and so on. Once was a deva and now was a demon. Now these demons are the cousins, and the two parties are always at war with each other, just as within us there is always a kind of struggle. What we call a struggle of conscience. childhood you would have been told that there was a little small person sitting here and a small person with a fork sitting there, and there'd be an antagonistic conversation between the two, and we'd hope that the angel side wins, that kind of thing. So the gods rule the three worlds. What are these three worlds? And here we have to really introduce some philosophy. Our three worlds are waking, dream, and dreamless sleep. But the three worlds, Bhu, Bhuva, Swaha, there they are. That is this observable universe, and then the one beyond that which is inferred, and the interspace between. And so the deities rule these three worlds. That means the sum totality. What do we mean philosophically by devas? We mean tanmatras. We mean subtle elements, manifestations of the divine or cosmic mind that produce the subtle waves behind everything and condense as gross waves for us. And whatever we want, by putting forward thought and sustaining it without any contradiction or neutralization, we activate those tanmatras, it condenses us, our world. There's a science to it. Therefore, be careful what we think. And later on here, we are told, I come as time also. In a number of places, the Lord says this. So time is an opportunity to insert a thought, either of the pure and noble kind, positive thought, non-egocentric thought, or of the negative kind, which ultimately will work against us. And so, these worlds are seen mythologically to be the upper, the middle, the lower, and where men dwell is the middle. And so, occasionally the demons gain control, seizing the thrones of the deities and usurping their power, and all of the mythology that we find, that we read in the Puranas and so on, is all this mutual struggle. Even this Mahabharata is a historical example of this particular struggle. Now, recently, of course, and this is the wonderful festival, so we find that this is the 10th day of a whole festival that has been going on, celebrating this very drama put in as the sum total of cosmic energy in a feminine form. We say Mother Durga, and 10 forms are there, but ultimately this is her victory day. And so it's a tremendous day, and very appropriate that we are talking about this subject on this day. So ultimately, good triumphs. Why? Because to keep a balance, we have to have goodness to neutralize whatever we deem to be bad. Or, that's in moral terms, human moral terms. But in universal terms, plus and minus, good and bad, drawing in, going out, there has to be some balance that keeps the universe in a sustained condition. And within us we have all these various demons. We have to name them, of course, lust and greed, summarize it. But lust and greed, jealousy, pride. If you go around the personality typology of the Enneagram, you'll find every vice that belongs to humans dominated in some cases. Different personality types will be more inclined toward anger, others more toward envy, pride, and so on. All of these are there within us. And so in the beginning stages, there seems to be a constant battle, a struggle, so that our goodness dominates. The moral struggle is there, until it becomes easy and natural, and we don't see things in that way. We only see things as a totality of fullness. That's a good evolutionary stage, spiritual stage to be in. But for the time being, we're dealing with this duality of morality. And so, when the demons, or your own demonic nature, if you want to put it that way, dominates, then we require some divine grace of some kind. And so it's to appeal to the highest possible authority, the highest level of energy, to rescue us from all of this. And so the deities have to go to Vishnu, the preserver, and pray to him to help them out of the difficulty. And sometimes he does it in a very curious way, she says. And so in such an epoch, Hiranyakashipu lived and was king, and he defeated all the deities and seated himself on the throne of the three worlds, declaring that nowhere in the universe was there any god but himself, and that both demons and men must worship him alone. And then in fear of a coming catastrophe, the deities themselves began to walk the earth in the form of men, and doubtless they appealed also to the Lord Vishnu, imploring his aid. And in any case, soon after the king's victory, a little son was born to him, that is, this king of the demons, and even specifies in the city of Multan in the Punjab. It's identified like that, and his name Prahlada. Curiously enough, with such a father, the little Prahlada proved actually a very religious child, influenced by the mother. And he seemed to have inborn ideas about worship and about the gods, and his father, who had determined to drive the thought of the deities out of the world, was very much troubled about him. We can call this episode an episode of atheism. After all, is atheism a disbelief in anything other than materialism? That is the kind of atheism, materialist atheism that we find. And in an age of science, in the Western world, science and materialism seem to be equated. But the materialist philosophy doesn't really hold up. And so we can expect that if we are living in a world of atheism, or a period or epoch like that, we expect that through that same discovery instinct of man, we'll discover this noble side again. And so later we are told, of all the sciences, I'm the science of the self. We'll come to that later. So, the teacher who Prahlada's father engaged wanted him to have much better control over this Prahlada, who had this religious instinct, and the teacher took the prince to his own home, and it was all to no purpose, because when they taught him his alphabet, showing him the letter K, what happened was Krishna came out. And K is for Krishna, said the child. The teacher's trying to say that K is for, something else, for kicking maybe. But he says, no, K is for Krishna. The child would reply and learn it eagerly. And G is for goals. No, he says, G is for Gopala. Everything that they would teach him, he applied at once in this way. Not only did he himself talk of nothing but Krishna, he spent much of his time also in teaching his worship to the other boys. And this was too much for his father. If you want to be a real devotee, you can pick up any clue anywhere. This is why we're teaching Vibhuti Yoga, why Krishna teaches it, because he says, you can take any example anywhere you like and use it as a thread to lead you, to link. See how Sri Ramakrishna noticed a boy on the maiden there in Calcutta with one leg in a certain position and arms in a certain position, leaning against a tree. Immediately Ramakrishna saw Krishna. Oh, there you are playing your flute in the posture with one leg crossed over the other, standing, just like Krishna. Everything reminded him, you see, of the divine. In this way, we can also cultivate this devotion. So we now have something of a definition of devotion. After all these chapters really are chapters on Bhakti Yoga. Up until the end of the 12th chapter, the theme is Bhakti Yoga. And so, we should learn the art and the skill of noticing everything as a manifestation of the divine and making a trace back, a delightful kind of journey back, taking up any theme we like, back to the source, blissful base. Well, yesterday, I was inserted into a program, guided meditation, with celebrating Navaratri. And of course, it's a social occasion. It's quite difficult to get a silence necessary for any kind of meditation or any kind of thought or conversation. So it was very funny. Still, I took the challenge up and said, let's do it anyway, because some people were interested in it. And naturally, there are people in the front who are interested, and people in the back who are interested in social interaction. Social interaction means, you know, talking at the top of your voice, and children running around, and all kinds of mayhem going on there. So I began by saying, you know, if we really want to learn meditation, we should be able to meditate in the middle of Grafton Street. We should be able to find a poise there. And as much as we can in a cave. Shall we try it? So they all nodded in agreement. And so we did it. Curiously enough, everybody in the back went quietish. I wouldn't say 100% quiet, but quietish, so that one person gave feedback afterwards. He said, beautiful meditation, he said. And the background was like a kind of hum, like a kind of background om. And we loved it, you see. So we can transform anything, any situation. You see, in meditation, there's no such thing as a distraction. Whatever comes in, you pick it up and you steer it toward the highest. I remember in Zimbabwe there was one devotee who lived in a beautiful, beautiful area. From their place, she could look across and see the mountains. I forget what they were called. And away outside Harare. And she was an architect, so she managed to construct a house so beautifully, you'd appreciate it, you know. Chains where the rainfall came and the water would follow the chains and go to an underground a reservoir for reuse.
Harvesting tank, isn't it?
Something like that, I don't know. But they would pump there and could use it for various purposes and so on. And she had constructed a particular cave-like structure. In Zimbabwe it's warm enough to do that. And that she made her shrine. Something like a cave, beautiful to sit in. You couldn't wish for a better environment. When I asked one day, how's your meditation? She says, oh, it's terrible. Because you see, well, I heard you get up early in the morning. She said, yes, yes, yes. And the sun rises over the hills, it's beautiful. And I can sit there 5 o'clock in the morning. Every day I sit there. Are you cold? No, 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 it's very warm. Well, what's the problem? As soon as I sit there, tuck, 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 the borehole pump comes in. I said, how wonderful. See, because borehole pump, sound requires the air, requires a medium of air to carry it, requires akasha, the wonderful design of the air, like a funnel, takes the sound in, amplifies it, and the section of the brain interprets the sound. 100 different activities are required for this to happen, and it's all God's glory. And after all, doesn't all sound come from Om? So she was thinking it's a distraction, and I was thinking it's a means. It's a travel ground for meditation. It's a way of making a pilgrimage to the center. So we need to revalue everything, the whole of life. And in this way, Prahlada was doing it. Everything, wherever he looked, whatever sound he heard, traced it back to this divine element. As he was a devotee of Krishna, took him back to Krishna. And so, like this it went on, and I'm going to short-circuit the story a little bit. And so, anyway, there's a conversation, and he was asked in great anger, I hear that you have been worshipping Krishna, says his father. His father thundered. And when the little boy who had been brought away from his books and from his study stood before the throne, honestly he said, oh yes, I have. Are you going to promise me that you will never do it again, said his father, the king. And he looked very terrible, while the royal jewel in his turban shook with rage. How beautifully she puts it. No, father, I cannot promise, said poor little Prahlada. See how the truthfulness of youth comes out. You cannot promise, shouted his father, in amazement at his daring. But I can have you killed. See, the demonic nature, his own son, he prepared to torture and kill. Not unless it is the will of Krishna, said the child firmly. You see, even that circumstance. We'll see about that, said Hiranyaksh. He ordered his guards to take Prahlada and throw him, though he was his own son, throw him down to the bottom of the ocean and there pile up rocks on the top of him, something like the mafia. He hoped up to the last moment that the little one would be frightened and run back to give the promise he required, just the threat of it. But Prahlada didn't come. He was quite happy, quite preferred. But he had faith. No matter what happens to me, I'm a child of Krishna, and Krishna will rescue me. And even not, why should I be afraid of death? I'll go to Krishna. So the fact was, he was worshipping Krishna in his own heart with such a feeling of love and happiness. That's what is generated in bhakti. Love and happiness. No enforced love. Why should we love God? We love God because God is lovable. But we are so estranged from that. What is ignorance? Ignorance is a measure of distance between you and God. And when that becomes close and intimate, and nearness becomes oneness eventually, in that process a great joy arises and progressively increases. But he scarcely heard his father's words because they were drowned out by love and happiness. And he didn't even notice when they put him on a stone slab and piled large or huge blocks up on the top of him and threw the whole great mass out into the ocean. He never noticed. He had forgotten all about himself, and that was the secret of it. But no rocks could be kept down kept down on one who forgot himself like this, detached from the body completely, because attached to Krishna. So everything fell aside, and he rose again to the surface of the water. Then Prahlada remembered, and at once he found himself kneeling on the shore, face to face with the Lord Krishna himself. The lotus-eyed smiled gently. Light seemed to be streaming out round him in all directions. And he put his hand on Prahlada's head to bless him, saying, "My child, ask of me what you want, what you will." "O Lord," said Prahlada, "I don't want a long life or riches or anything like that, but do give me a love of God that shall never change in my heart. Increase the enormous love I already have. Increase that even more. However much other things may come and go around me, that in the midst of this changeful world I may cherish unchanging love for thee, O thou unchangeable. This alone is my whole wish." You can go even further. You know, when I conduct yoga exercise classes for people, I notice people think the minimum is the maximum. But when a person stretches, you realize they can do it half an inch more. And then they surprise themselves, "Oh, I can do it a little bit more." In this same way, when we feel we have achieved, as it were, a great feeling of devotion and love for God, let us not be deluded. There is always an inch more, a greater intensity. And every day should be an increase in intensity. Let us not draw the line and say, "I am a great devotee." It's a bit like saying, I am humble. You know, politicians say, but in all honesty, they say. There's nothing, to most people maybe, there's nothing so honest about a politician, you see. And I am humble. Well, there's nothing humble about that statement. See? So even in spiritual life, we develop a certain pride. We think we may be better than the average person, drowned in their ignorance. That attitude alone tells us of our own ignorance. "Prahlada," said the Lord Krishna solemnly, "you shall be always my soldier and my lover." Then everything that was beautiful disappeared, for the king's guards had found Prahlada again and were carrying him once more into his father's presence. "Who brought you out of the sea?" said the king, scarcely believing his own eyes. "Krishna," said the child. "What name dared you to utter, said his father, growing purple with fury. Krishna's replied, Prahlada, where is this Krishna of yours? Said Hiranyakshipu.
Read it again. That sentence, read it again.
Which one? Where is this Krishna of yours?
That.
Or before that? What name dared you to utter? Yeah.
After that.
Said his father, growing purple with fury. Krishna's, replied Prahlada. Where is this Krishna of yours? Asked Hiranyakshipu. Prahlada's eyes opened wide in wonder. Why, he said, he is everywhere. Because for the devotee, everything is colored with Krishna, or the most beloved form of God that you have, your Ishtadevata. Wherever you look, where is he not? You can see how you see the story of Guru Nanak when he was faced with a question in the Muslim world. You can't face your feet in this direction. It's an insult to God. Then his counter question is, oh please, or his request was, please spin me around and direct my feet in the direction where this Allah is not. If you say he's omnipresent, then he's omnipresent. Some people say, you see, oh, I can't meditate or do worship in my house. You asked me to put a shrine there, then yes. But I couldn't do it. The house wasn't designed to put it in the north or the east. That's all right. God is everywhere. So, Prahlada's eyes opened in wonder. Why? He said, he is everywhere. Even in this pillar, said the king mockingly. Yes, even in that pillar, answered the little son. The king uttered a loud, jarring laugh. Let him appear to me then, he cried, in whatever form and deed best please him. We find echoes now of materialist atheism. Please give me evidence of God. Because they're thinking, I'm going along the lines and persuaded by theologians themselves that try to persuade people that that entity is an extra cosmic, distant entity and is not immanent in everything and present here and now. So even in that pillar, yes, even in that pillar, the king uttered a loud, jarring laugh. Terrible words and wondering prayer of Hiranyakshipu, great beyond that of common men, must have been his power, for at this demand, ringing out into the ears of the Lord himself, the pillar cracked from side to side, and out sprang one, half lion and half like a man and half like a lion, Narasimha incarnation, who leapt upon him and tore him into pieces. So the demons were driven out and the devas took their own places once more, but some say that the soul of Hiranyakshipu was glad of this release. That's an interesting turn, which is there in much of the mythology, that the demon is glad that they are released. They got moksha at the hands of the Lord himself. See how in the Ramayana, how Ravana, how he gained liberation according to some, because all he could think of was Rama.
Vali.
Yes. So even be angry, but see how his mind was possessed with Rama, even in anger. So the demons were driven out and so on, and these hold that he was the same who in some later birth became Rama, king of Lanka, and who yet again came into the world as Shishupala. For once upon a time, long before, they say, and they are a great authority, I can assure you. You have to listen to what they say. We hear many tales. Oh, they say, and we have no understanding who they are. So, but a choice had been offered him. He might pass out of this bondage, it was said, after 7 births as the friend of God, or 3 as his enemy. And so this turn of events, this take on these tales, show us that actually, is this not all a drama, with some playing the role of demons and some playing the role of devas. Without a moment's doubt, he chose 3 birds as the enemy, that he might be the sooner returned to God. Wherefore he became Hiranyakshipu and Ravana, and yet again that Shishupala, whose story is still to tell in this book. So there's Cradle Tales of Hinduism, written by Sister Nivedita, in slightly non-contemporary language that we find today, but with such a beautiful way of putting it and phrasing it and painting a beautiful picture for us. So it's no wonder that of the Daityas I am Prahlada, because the devotee and the one that we are devoted to ultimately become the same. Nearness becomes oneness. The devotee reflects fully this manifestation of God. This is why we honor saints and sages and royal people, realized people of every geographic location and every historical era, in the past, in the present, and to come in the future also. That is why even in Guidance on Meditation, you see how Vivekananda asks us to salute all the sages of the past, all those great saints who went before us, and then teachers, and then God. And then he goes on, you see, of all the reckoners, I am time. So time is a great unfailing recorder of events, and to us time comes like a river, fortunately. Fortunately, because it gives us an opportunity for correction. A thought comes into the mental field, and after all, if it is all the divine, God comes as time. You can view it like this, as outstretched hands. Come on, my child, put something good in this. Because there are a series of these opportunities that come and present themselves and go. And they come and go very rapidly. We can reduce it to a unit called a second, but time comes even more rapidly than that. But let's say a second. So 1 second comes, and before we know it, our unconscious mind has put a series of thoughts in, probably of a negative kind, because our habit level is still in need of reform. And so the capacity to observe it, and then to watch the next gap, the next second, and put something useful in. Strong, true, wise, full, free, truth, beauty, goodness, love, harmony, put that in a series. And then if we have a kind of sporting attitude, we appeal to the Supreme Reckoner, the Lord, who here says, I am time. Of all the reckoners, I am time. And ask, please tell me, what was the time record that went? How was it recorded? And what is my unconscious bank balance? That is, how much positivity did I put in? We put it like that. So with every negative thought that comes, we can make an observation and use the next opportunity, call a second, the next one, the next one, the next one, and put something good in. What's the highest good we can put in? God. The Lord himself says, I come as time. Recognize the next second, Lord, you are the second itself, the opportunity itself. And then because of that, let me put a worshipful thought in. Let me worship you as time. And then I am the Lord of beasts, and Vainatya of birds. So we can short-circuit the interpretation a little bit, because Garuda, for example, is the vehicle of Vishnu. And when we look at what is the meaning of that, you see all the deities will have a vehicle. Here we find the Mother Durga with the vehicle of a lion. And the lion is said to be the lord of all beasts. In Africa, we think that the lion is the king. You must have seen the Lion King also. And so there's that understanding that the lion is the royal entity of the beasts. So royal that all the work is done by the lioness, actually. The lioness is the one that hunts and catches and shares out the meal like any mother should do. The lion, on the other hand, sits with his glorious mane in royal posture and supervises from afar, but still eats the rewards of the kill. And so this lion represents for us this rajas. Rajas means we have to have some kind of energetic impulse to do something. We can't just sit and be fatalists. We have to start where we are, and gather all our energy and move, consciously move toward revaluing the universe and inserting something noble. Let noble thoughts come to us from all sides, is the prayer. So the lion, of course, is the Lord of Peace, majestic and magnanimous as well in his own way. Because of his prowess, he has become the vehicle of the cosmic mother, says this commentary, tying this in very nicely with the period of worship that we are in at this point. So in this way, Garuda is similarly the vehicle of Vishnu. That is, a creature that can fly anywhere and everywhere, that kind of thing. So Vishnu, the one that pervades everywhere. We can say the whole observable universe is Vishnu. And then it goes on, Bhavanaha Bhavatam Asmi Ramaha Shastra Vratam Aham Jasharanam Makarash Chasmi Shrotasham Asmi Janavi. Of purifiers, I am the wind. Now, did you ever go to Cape Town?
No, Johannesburg, yeah.
Oh, okay, all right. See, in South Africa, Cape Town, there's a very famous wind called the Cape Doctor. It comes in a certain season and blows so hard that if you're standing, it can knock you over actually. And that Cape Doctor is called that because it just flushes out every germ that is there. All the germs and all the toxic industrial waste and so on, it gets all blown out. And so the wind is a purifier because it moves everywhere and flushes everything out. Very powerful it is. Even the power of the wind we can see, whipped up into a hurricane that removes rooftops. So this power is there, this Shakti is there, this great power is there. And if the Lord was any one of the elements we can see, most appropriately it is the wind. And of the wielders of weapons, I am Rama, because Rama is the one who wields the weapons with good results, with moral fruits. So, weapons today are used for war and destruction. And of course, weapons mentioned here are not the weapons we have today. Weapons we have today are so destructive that they destroy all the vulnerable people in society, even if there's pinpoint accuracy. Missiles slung at a distance, with seeming precision, with all the computer technology we have, we find still women, children, old people, vulnerable members of society that are destroyed by this. This cannot really be moral. And so therefore, when we use the weapons, it should be for the good. And we can see how Rama was not afraid to use the great celestial weapons granted, powerful weapons in those days. We have no idea whether they were in fact nuclear weapons, astras of that type, or whether they were just conventional weapons that we think of in those days. I think there's a great body of interpreters who would think that these are somehow great weapons in advance of the weapons we have, and there's no reason why there should not be that level of sophistication in ages gone by, thousands and thousands of years ago. After all, we have in the Ramayana the whole depiction of Ayodhya as an ideal city with parks and beautiful buildings presented, and places for bathing and storing grain And when we look at all the wonderful structures in the Indus Valley and so on, Harappa culture, we can easily imagine that that is so. This level of sophistication being there. So when we used weapons, Rama used weapons only for the good and for the destruction of the evil, and always resulting in good, a good result, a good effect, and never being abused. And then of fishes, I'm the shark. The shark is the most sophisticated fish that we know of. In those days, they must have noticed it. From 300 miles away, a shark can hear, that is, can pick up vibrations of something moving. It has an extraordinary skin. And of course, it has no bones. It has cartilage. It is the largest fish in the sea. So, with all this wonderful piece of organic engineering called the shark, naturally, of all fishes, I'm the shark. A lot of people fear sharks, you know. But now of late, we study the shark and see what a wonderful model of engineering it is, biological engineering. And of rivers, I am the Ganges. Of rivers, I am the Ganga. Shortly, today we were planning the trip in greater detail to India in January. And so we were seeing how many places along the Ganga. We had some visitors from Northern Ireland, and they said, so I think they mentioned Varanasi, so Varanasi will be able to bathe in the Ganga. I said, not just Varanasi. Everywhere we go, you'll be able to do it. If you're going to Rishikesh, you'll do it, you can do it. You go to Haridwar, you can do it. You're going to Varanasi, of course, you can do it. And of course, in Kolkata, you can do it also. So, what is special about the Ganga? Indeed, what is special about any river? A river is something that flows and represents God's grace. God's grace is something flowing. And I mentioned previously that we can't view necessarily evolution like a tree, a family tree. That's how it's depicted currently. But in the ancient days, that's not how it was depicted. We find that in Patanjali Yoga Sutras. Good and bad deeds are not the direct causes of transformations, and the commentary tells us, like a body of water that wants to reach, or the farmer wants it to reach his fields, there are so many obstacles in the way, and when you remove one obstacle, the water flows by itself. There's no need to take a bucket and transfer it laboriously from one section to another, or take a small teacup and do it, or a teaspoon. You simply open the gates and it floods through. In Zimbabwe we have the Kariba Dam, see? And these enormous gates holding back a huge body of water. I think it's one of the largest man-made lakes in the world. And the flow, when you open one floodgate, such a roar, and so many tons of water automatically transferred, generating electricity. Great, great power. And so in this way, this Shakti, this power, is brought to us as a flowing thing. And the flowing thing can be destructive or can be in our favor. In our favor is God's grace. And so therefore, over the last few days, we have seen the Divine Mother is all in her hands. Destruction is also in her hands. The ability to hide the Divine Presence is also in her hands. Mahamaya. And the power, capacity to reveal is also in our hands. Who else can we pray to? And so, this Ganga, this flowing thing, starting from a small spring or melting snow up in the mountains, and then gathering momentum. And I think Swami Vimokshananda made reference, if I remember correctly, to some film, National Geographic film or something like that, BBC film, depicting the journey along the Ganga, from its start along at every point. And what a wonderful journey, and how it gains momentum and gives life on the way. And so we see from a small body of melting snow, perhaps, we find gaining momentum. And with the catchment area increasing water, increasing its volume, and increasing the level of life, and increasing its rapidity. So this is life. This really represents life. And the Ganga, of course, has always been there from the times of the Rigveda, and other rivers too, Saraswati and so on, have all been mentioned. Saraswati was the largest of them and the most impressive. And of course, we speculate that it dried up, maybe towards the end of the Ice Age or something like that, some 10,000 years ago, or finding its final drying up, actually, around about 2000 BC or so, 1500, 2000 BC. From satellite imagery, we can see where it was, and it was huge, so wide. And so we find Saraswati as a river, but also applied to a goddess, the one that, gives us all this wisdom and knowledge, the one that flows. Everything is a flow. God's grace is ever flowing. This flow is also depicted by Ramakrishna. The wind of God's grace is ever flowing. We have but to set our sail. So this God's grace is flowing. This is why the cow is also sacred, because it's a producer of something that flows, milk, that sustains our life. And sustains with its various products, sustains all life. So it's no surprise, therefore, that many rivers begin with go something, a cow, something that resembles a symbol of God's grace ever flowing. And so the Ganges is also known as Jatnavi because of her having become the daughter of the sage Janu. We come back then to mythology. When Bhagirata was escorting the Ganga, she inundated the sacrificial field of this sage, who became annoyed at her intrusion and swallowed her up. At the supplication of Bhagirata, the sage permitted the river to come out of his ear. That way she becomes Jagnavi. Can we take it from mythology and see what it is, the meaning? Among rivers, Ganges is the most sacred. Her water bottle for any length of time doesn't putrefy, so they say. And she is venerated as having come from the head of Shiva. You can imagine somebody, and Sister Nivedita also picks this up, somebody meditating there in front of the Himalayan mountains. It's easy to see how, you can see how the Ganga is flowing, how it's coming, an almost triangular aspect, which is a mountain representing strength and solidity, and the snow. And it's easy to see, there I see the person of Shiva. And there I see the Ganga flowing down the hill, the hair, and providing life. And how it produces strength and solidity and purity in me when I look at this mountain. Can I not see it as auspicious and see it as Shiva himself? You can see how these ideas therefore come from the power and insights of meditation. So we just preempt next week's passage then and pick it up in greater detail next week. And so it says, what we have is Sarganam Adir Antascha Madhyam Chaiva Ham Arjuna Adhyatma Vidya Vidyanam Varaha Pravadatam Aham. Of created things I am the beginning and the end and also the middle of Arjuna. What I told some children at the Durga Puja event, and I got them to try to recite, you see, life is a journey and we are the traveler. We come from God and we go to God. And this echoes, of course, the Taittiriya Upanishad, the beginning, the middle and the end, the whole thing. Or, in Christian terminology, echoing Ter Dashadan, the great Christian mystic, really, of modern times, and a paleontologist. He described it as the Alpha and the Omega, see. And the Alpha and the Omega is the same, actually. It's just one point on a journey of the whole totality. And so then, more tellingly, we'll explore this in greater detail next week, of the sciences. This phrase is there, you see, Adhyatma Vidya, Vidyanam. Of the sciences, I am the science of the self. And this requires a great deal of commentary. And of those who debate, I am the reason. We'll pick this up next week. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.